What's up, guys? I'm back again with another video, and this time I'll be going over different ways that you can play branded synchro, and also like kind of like a mini reintroduction, as it's been like over half a year since I made a video on this deck. So the main goal of this deck, if you haven't seen it before, is that you're using the branded cards not to fusion summon, but to synchro and link summon to make your plays. I don't know. Well, like less weak to Ash because you're relying a lot less on branded fusion to resolve to do your plays, and you also like fusion summon too with Cartesia into your fusions, so you still have access to your bosses like Mirror Jade, or you can even use like stuff like Albion to maybe make Furious. So I've been really holding back on this deck just because I didn't think I feel like in some metas where there isn't a lot of lighter dark decks, like at the top tier of the meta, this deck really does suffer, as you don't really get to abuse the fact that the Mystios are your engine, but simultaneously are hand traps. So in this format, with all the Fiendsmith cards, I feel like these are definitely much more real hand traps now. So that would give us like 17 non-engine. And going over to this calculator, we have a 94% chance to open one non-engine. But in this format, you really want to open two, as you're not really going to set the opponent with one. So it's more of a 70% chance to open two, which is still pretty strong, as you still have an absurd amount of non-engine to try and beat the opponent, or just weaken their board to a point where you can just close it out with your engine. So still running 3 Cartesian Quem. So these are like main normal summons to go into either your Synchro stuff, or most of the time you're not using Cartesia to Synchro if you have to normal it. It's like your semi-extender, and if you are normaling it, you're usually using it to fusion summon into Granganol to get plays that way. If you're doing it with Sarna, you're usually sending Branded Fusion Retribution to play that way. 3 Quam, this is what makes the deck what it is. Very strong card, as with some hands, usually 3 card combos, you get to abuse its effect to reborn a card, usually Cartesia as a tuner. And 3 Fauna of Albaz, you can use this as your normal summon a lot to link off for Striker Dragon, use a Bestial to banish it, and link off into Seal. Just pretty good. Speaking of that, you can I don't know when it's coming out, but there's a new like Blue Eyes Link one, which requires a Dragon or Spellcaster, which is really good in this deck. As if you have like Quem Bistio or like Cartesia Bistio, and you get like Impermed on your Cartesia or Quem, you can link them off for that, which is a Dragon. You can Bistio Banish and make Seal, which is so good. Good enough to the point where I might either cut Striker or cut Sprint, as at this point I think it's decently cuttable card. And then we have one Bestial Oliver, as this card is searchable off Lubellion and can act as another noble summon to do that Tricker Dragon play I just talked about. And then we just have a lot of Bestials, one more carrier. This is like the main send off Quem usually. It's like that or Cartesia itself, depending on the line. But you usually want to banish this and get your plus, either switching Cartesia or Albion most of the time. Kit, you play this card just because it allows you to make High Spirits like a 1-card, semi 1-card combo. It's pretty much this, a putback, and a discard, which can be pretty much any card in this entire deck except for Nibiru, since Citadrol and Valuable Spellcasters, you can send that in Granganol to get a search. Shrouded Dragon, just at 1 here. I feel like with an extra count of Bistios, there's a really good argument to actually play more of this card, since you can use it to dump Albaz and get Light and Darks in the grave that way. And it's also just an upstart that gets you a plus, like being able to get Retribution in grave, so you can go like grab back a Branded Fusion later. It's an extremely strong card that, if you really want to play more of it, I recommend that you can try it out. Then we have 3 Nibiru, 3 Droll, 3 Valor. So since I'm playing more Bystials, there's a lot less room for like regular non-engine quote unquote. So I'm running like the two highest impact ones, and Drill also doubles as a high spirit send, which is nice, and Valor over Imperm just because it gets a lighter dark engrave and is also a high spirit pitch. And we have also one brand of fusion, three high spirits. This is also probably one of the best cards in the deck by far, as it gets you one of your starters, normal summons, whatever, and sets up your graveyard with like Albion, Titanic Glide usually. Or even Granganol's pretty good, as it can use its tag out into Quem, which is really solid. One in red. Usually set this during your opponent's turn to go into Guardian Chimera, which is a card I haven't really been. When I first played the deck, was confused why I wasn't in there because it's just so strong, especially when you're playing like a ton of hand traps. It just becomes even more value. In white, I don't think this is a very cuttable card. It comes up so many times, especially when you're using Albaz a lot more. And when you're doing like link plays or Striker Dragon, you can if you get both into the graveyard as well, you basically get a Miracle Fusion for Mirror Jade, which is solid. Just running the one regained, the follow up it generates, and card advantage is just crazy. So you definitely want to run this, and also just because it can also just revive back Dissipator when you have to link it off or tribute for Lubellion, which is also quite nice. Not playing like Beast or any of the other continuous traps, or spells for that matter, just because Beast is just kind of a brick. And this deck doesn't have. It definitely has a decent amount of cards you don't want to draw, but not crazy enough where I want to play a higher deck count. You could experiment with that as well if you want to, like if you're playing more stratted. Because like Makara is not great to draw. Kit sometimes isn't great to draw. It's just like an extra normal that you're probably not even gonna summon. In white and red can be mid, and Retribution is usually pretty bad. For extra deck, this is pretty much the same as like all my previous lists, but now I think Sprint, instead of being somewhat mandatory, is more flexible now. So you could switch this out for like Sanctifier if you really want to. But that card doesn't really come up for me very often, so like still have the Sprint in here. For the side deck, 3 Phantasme, because it, it gets you a dragon on your field, which you can use for your link plays and getting some draws to try to dig for your like actual non-engine. The high impacts is pretty good. Ogre and Cosmic for the Tempai matchup, as Bystials aren't that great against it, and it makes up almost the majority of the non-engine in this deck. And Cosmic also works as being able to just hit floodgates. Talent and Callby for going first. You can also put Talent going second depending on the matchup. But I usually like running these going first to just stop my opponent's hand traps, or just being able to hand rip or draw if I need to. As with a bunch of Bystials in this deck, you're likely to find an extender, which I think is really nice. And then 2 Brain Infusion in the side deck, as you can put this in going seconds and use it like a board breaker, as your Synchro and Link plays are not likely to resolve. But a very important thing with this deck, if you decide to either like main deck 3 Branded Fusion, or like just play this deck in general, is deciding whether you should go for a fusion line or like a Synchro or a Link line, as it can be the difference in the game. And like, it's something important to know and keep in mind when you play this deck. So for the second build, we have something a little more spicy, which is a Centurion build. So you still keep like the main core of the branded Synchro engine, but like cut down on like the branded spell traps, which definitely is a little annoying, just because cutting down extra deck space to make room for these synchros, so it's like a lot harder to play high spirits. As the reason you'd play like 2 Granganol is because you want a high spirits pitch 1 if you have a spellcaster, and then Cartesia fuse into the other one. But what's like interesting about this is the Branded Synchro engine is surprisingly good at making 12s, So you can go into Auxilla to get to stand up and just like bridge the Centurion stuff that way to calamities the opponent. Which is pretty good. You're still running the same amount of non-engine as you're still on 8 Bestials, 9 non-engine, which is still nice. In this build, you can probably play Imperm instead, but again, I like having this as a way to get extra light and darks in the graveyard. Speaking of that, stand-up Centurion really helps with that, so it works with the Bestials kind of nicely, especially if you're pitching stuff like Mercurier where you can banish that and just get a plus, which is really nice. And yeah, there's nothing much more to say. Like, Emblema Oath is a pretty strong extender in general, so running 3 of this is pretty good. You can also maybe expand the Centurion package a little more if you want, because, like, drawing these, and if you're not using these at your normal summon can be pretty bad. So, like, making this more like it's kind of hard to make it more like a Centurion deck. But like increasing the package may be beneficial depending on the way you want to play this. And for the last build, this is the most experimental and weird, which is playing Horus cards, as you can also use it to pitch light and dark monsters and get 8s on the field, which you can use to make like stuff like Photon Lord. You can cut stuff like High Spirits to make your extra deck a little more flexible if you want to include like more Xyz monsters, or just like 12s to synchro off with like an Mseti or like a Quem or something. You can also like play Centurion cards in here as well, but then that makes it kind of makes it a bit different. And you already have pretty much no non-engine besides the Bestials in here, so I don't think I'd recommend it. But the Horus cards are pretty interesting here. And the reason why I play however you pronounce this guy's name, in here instead of the other Horuses is that this actually bridges with High Spirits with the Rimrum, which I think is pretty cool. So yeah, that's it with all the builds. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed, and let me know down below if you want to see some replays of these decks. I don't know about this one. This is just an idea I had and just wanted to present because I thought it was interesting, but maybe show off like the Centurion one and show you what it can do. So that'll be all it for the video. See ya.